Officials and authorities are now warning people that they need to stock up now and they need to be prepared for a major war. This is going on right now in multiple countries, and also shelves and survival food, preparedness food is running out quickly. Shelves are emptying. Things like canned food, things like freeze dried food are emptying the shelves and flying off the shelves fast. So get these things now, get prepared now. Let's get into more details here. You guys can see it says Swedes stock up on food as fears of war deepen. And actually, authorities in Sweden are encouraging people to get stocked up. You can see here it says Swedes are stocking up on food items in case of war, as more conflict in Europe no longer feels like a distant possibility, and authorities encourage measures to boost readiness. Okay, so this is happening in Sweden right now. They're having entire fairs, preparedness fairs and festivals. And this is also happening as well too in Denmark. You can see here it says a run on canned mackerel and emergency radios. The reason is drones. It says the Danish public has been unsettled by a wave of mysterious drone incursions, which has underscored the country's vulnerability. You can see here this guy who is shipping out preparedness gear and survival food in Europe. He's saying that he's been swamped and people have been buying out all his goods because they are worried. All right, we will get into more details of that. Even emergency radios, little crank radios, you can't get them. Can't get them in these certain countries in Europe, and this could happen in the US too if things did escalate. The US is part of NATO. If one of these NATO countries were attacked, the US could be just as involved as any European country is as well. So you should be stocked up as well too. We could see supply chain issues as well if there are lines drawn in the sand with Russia, China, and the United States, because China could potentially limit supply chain necessities and also supply chain deliveries, okay, to Western countries. It says here Swedes are stocking up on food items in case of war, and authorities are encouraging measures to boost readiness. At a civil preparedness fair in southwest Stockholm, a 71-year-old told the AFP that she is taking the prospect of hostility seriously and preparing as much as she can. She said, I bought a camping stove. I've taken a course on preservation in an old-fashioned way where you can preserve fresh vegetables, meat, and fruit that lasts for 30 years without a refrigerator. All right. These are things everyone should have. Even in the US, you should have these skills: canning skills, prepping skills, gardening skills, growing your own food, animal husbandry. Okay, all these things. It's a long road to be fully self-sufficient. It's almost impossible to really do it unless you are extremely dedicated. But the average person can at least be stocked up, all right? Have survival kits. Think about what you would need if you were going to just go live out in the woods for a couple weeks, okay? I have a few bug out bags just packed for things like that, because sometimes we do just go camp out in the woods for a few days or even a few weeks in our RV. Okay, so think about these things that you need for you personally and have them ready to go. All right, and that's not ideal. All right, nobody wants to bug out, go out in the woods, but even if you're bugging in and the power's out and the water's off, it's going to be like dry camping inside your own home. And having these extra comforts can definitely make your life a lot easier, right? Have some propane bottles, have a little burner so you can cook stuff with these propane bottles, or have a propane stove, okay? Have some type of generator, even just a little solar generator. It costs like a few $100s that you can have charge up a little battery, and then you can get an adapter to charge it in your car. Something along those lines. Have some gas tanks filled, right? Have your car tanks filled. Have lots of canned food, right? Canned meat, canned vegetables, canned fruit. And you're going to get sick of this stuff. It doesn't taste the greatest, okay? Especially canned meats. But it's better to have it than to not have it, all right? Rice as well, too, is a major staple that gets you a ton of calories. Okay, 20-pound bag of rice is enough calories for a couple weeks for one adult. Okay, so, and what, that's like $10, maybe $12, depends on where you're at. So it doesn't cost that much. Just have some things in backup. Have a water filter, a little Sawyer mini, or a Life straw, something along those lines. They're not even that much. They're like $20, so you can filter water if you need it and cook your food. All right, because who knows? Who knows what can happen? We could see cyber attacks. We could see kinetic attacks. We could see nuclear events. All right, we could see stock market economy fluctuations and crashes if a big war breaks out as well too. If Europe's entire economy becomes war centered, then they're not going to be buying and trading the typical way that they normally do, and it could cause economic disruptions across the world. Okay, you can see here, it says here that they had their preparedness week, all right, and they're trying to get people ready. It says here that the idea is to mobilize all of society, from authorities to citizens and businesses, to collectively resist armed aggression while maintaining essential functions. The focus, as often as it is in Sweden, is on individual responsibility. Everyone is encouraged to stockpile enough food to live independently for at least 7 days without external aid in the event of a crisis. All right, this is standard, at least 7 days, hopefully a couple weeks if you can, because something big happens, they're not going to be able to get to you. Okay, if you're just sitting in your home and you're safe and you didn't get your leg blown off and you have food, your last priority. I hate to say that, but you're deprioritized. 98% of the public is going to be in an emergency situation or a big war. So you're going to be on your own. You're going to want to just stay there and not attract attention, potentially too, for a couple weeks or longer if you can. It says that means, quote, resources can initially be directed, for instance, to elderly and sick people, the Swedish Food Agency writes on this website. That's a good idea too. Have a little bit extra in case you need it for someone else that you know, all right? For kids, have some for your animals too, all right? That's a big thing, is, dog food goes by quick. Have an extra bag of dog food, cat food for your animals. It says, meanwhile, society has time to readjust so that everyone can get help. It says Swedish Civil Contingency Agencies has published a list of recommended foods that are high in fat and protein and easy to store. It includes pesto, dried meat or fish, jam, chocolate, mashed potatoes, powdered milk, and biscuits. Down here it says, quote, in a war scenario, people will be more physically active than under normal circumstances. This is what the emergency planning officer at the Swedish Foods Agency told the AFP, adding that on average the increased need will be about 100 calories, right? And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce some of these names because I don't want to mess them up. This one doesn't look too bad. Martin Svenberg, a business developer from Stockholm, has taken the advice to heart and stockpiled ample food reserves in his basement for his family. Stacked in boxes in a cramped storage unit are 100 kilograms of flour, dozens of cans of various foods, and an array of freeze-dried meals, enough to last them 3 months. For him, the food is not just for sustenance, but also for moral support, which is essential in such situations. Quote, stocking up on food that you like, that you eat in normal life, I think is really important. I mean, when you go to your mom's place or your dad's place and you get the food that they made for you as a kid, you get that sense of relief and nostalgia. The same thing goes for a food crisis. That's what I was saying earlier, is canned food doesn't taste great, especially if you have to eat it for a long time. It starts tasting rubbery, some of it. Okay, so yeah, get stuff that you like. Don't just get, the cheap stuff or the bulk, the bulk unseasoned canned chicken. That stuff, it tastes terrible. It tastes bad. All right, I've tried that stuff multiple times. I've tried to season it, cook it a little more. There's not much, at least for me, there's not much I can do. I'd rather eat canned tuna or something than that unseasoned, boiled chicken in a can, whatever it is. That is pretty prevalent. Okay, so get stuff that you like. Don't just bulk up on calories and rice and pinto beans and grab, if you don't even like rice and pinto beans. Okay, get stuff you like and stockpile that. All right, also Denmark. Okay, same thing happening. And I think this is going to spread throughout Europe, but it's happening mostly in the eastern side of Europe primarily right now, all right, closest to Russia. It says, one night last week, a Danish photographer stepped out on his porch to have a smoke in a little town in northern Denmark near a military base, and he saw something, quote, whizzing across the sky and flashing red and green. A half hour later, he spotted another one. All right, this is when he realized that there is a drone incursion over military bases and airports in Copenhagen. All right, so that's why people are on high alert, because they're actually seeing it now. It's becoming more real. They're like, wait a minute, these drones are actually in our airspace. They're actually breaching military bases and airports and shutting them down. So they are actually concerned. People are worried, and they're taking the steps needed. You can see here, quote, we've seen a crazy increase in sale, said Valdemar Badstedt, a salesperson at Wolf Tactical, a military surplus shop in Copenhagen. People are getting worried about war. It says that Wolf Tactical sales of freeze-dried camping food have shot up by 400%, its owner said. Danish news outlets have reported that at other stores there's been a run on emergency rations, emergency radios, rice, and canned mackerel too. The Danish public broadcaster just put out a story, quote, how to talk to your child about drones and the hybrid attacks. And Denmark's not alone. Since September 22nd, Norwegian authorities detected unknown drones in their airspace too and briefly shut down Oslo airport. The police in Sweden are investigating reports of drone buzzing a Swedish naval base. All right, so people are getting prepared. People are stocking up. All right, authorities are warning people to get ready. We also just had a jets scramble as well too. NATO jets scrambled just today. All right, we will get into more details of that in just a second, but this is becoming a daily reality for people in Europe, and it seems so foreign when you're in the United States. It's like, how are they allowing drones or planes to enter airspace? But if you remember, at the end of the last year, there were all these random drones. Nobody really knew where they were, or where they were coming from, who they were, and they said that it was military contractors after a few months, right? That was the official story. But imagine that feeling, just that eeriness. What are these drones? Whose drones are these? Where are they coming from? But it's not from the government, and it's from a foreign country, hostile country. And it's a new way of life for them, okay? So people are getting prepared, people are taking it serious, and people in the US should too, just to be preemptive and to be ready, because if one of these NATO countries, it could just be a drone strike on an airport, hits a plane or something, that could be enough to draw NATO in and draw the United States in, activate Article 5. And you can see here it says that NATO jets scrambled after Putin pounds Ukraine with 50 missiles and 500 drones, with at least 5 casualties as children among the injured. So it says NATO scrambled jets, and this is becoming more current, or more, this is occurring more often, is what I meant to say, where NATO jets and NATO assets are actively responding to Russian attacks and Russian threats, okay? They even entered airspace, Estonian airspace, Russian fighter jets did just a few weeks ago, and Italian fighter jets were scrambled to fend them off. And I believe they were in the airspace for 12 minutes before they were intercepted. Okay, so this has been happening more often. I think Russia's testing NATO's resolve. They're putting more pressure on NATO to be like, hey, are you sure you want to keep continuing to support Ukraine? Because if you do, then we're going to potentially be targeting assets in NATO territories, all right? And right on the border, you can see here, all right, where these jets were scrambled from this map here, all right? So I think Russia is putting the pressure on. I think NATO's putting pressure on too. That's why we're seeing these responses. It's not just, a typical word of words. They are actively scrambling fighter jets in response to these incidences multiple times over the past few months we've seen this. Okay, so this is, and if it only takes one slip up, that's the big thing here, is that what if one of these jets get hit, right? What if they're hit by a missile? What if they're hit by a drone? What if they are hit by another plane, another fighter jet, a Russian jet? But all these interactions between NATO and Russia directly are increasing the chances of a direct conflict between these two forces, which could cause a broader war, right? And cause NATO to be more heavily involved. If Polish fighter jets get hit by Russian missiles or a Russian drone, anything along these lines, then it could activate Article 5. And now the US is involved and fighting Russia directly. Okay, so something to be aware of, something to be prepared for, okay? And something to think about too is that Putin would most likely use nuclear weapons, okay? Because if you had to fight all of NATO, all the European countries in NATO, and the United States on a conjoined front, then it'd be very difficult for him, right? He's already struggling to secure Ukraine. I'm just being realistic here. He really has not claimed any additional territory, has not made really any real fronts in Ukraine, and he's lost a lot of men. Okay, I believe Russia actually implemented a military draft, a mandatory draft just last week, because they're losing so many people. Ukraine is losing a ton too. Of course they are, taking tons of hits. But Russia should be the more dominant force here, and they are really just kind of at a standstill with Ukraine currently. And that's just with NATO backing. If it was full-on NATO versus Russia, I honestly don't think Russia could compete unless they were to drag a powerful ally into a place like China or something along those lines, which could happen, but is rare, at least in a military front. They might help economically or in a supply chain sense, cutting off resources, things like that. But I think it'd be very rare for China to actively engage with Russia against NATO, okay? Because China's entire economy is just exporting cheap goods to Europe and the United States, essentially NATO countries. That's their whole, market strategy, okay? So that's their entire economic strategy in China, is to create cheap knockoff goods to sell to Europe and the United States, okay? And it's been working for them. So I don't know if they would risk that, but this is all just increasing the chances of these things happening. So let me know what you guys think down below. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying prepared, staying stocked up. Get these things, guys. Get some food. All right, get some batteries, some small batteries and some big batteries too, that you can charge your phone, charge your computer, things like that. They have like little solar systems now, have little solar panels that are a few $100. It's not going to, be powering your fridge or anything like that, but you can at least charge your phone, maybe charge your computer, maybe, charge your sat phone or plug a Starlink mini into it, something along those lines, just so you have backup systems and communication. So thank you guys. Hope you have big blessings for your life and your family, and I hope you have a big old blessed day.